You remember the eyes, though you've never seen them in a mirror. Not human, not pleading, just watching. No trembling need, no hunger for approval, only a gaze that waits. Not to be answered, but to be obeyed. And not out of fear, never out of fear. You used to think morality was a negotiation, a quiet deal struck between your guilt and your gain. But then, the creature sat beside you, not speaking, not judging, and still, you hesitated to lie in its presence, as if it knew, as if it measured you with something colder than instinct, something ancient, impervious, exact. You laughed it off. A dog is just a dog. But the feeling wouldn't leave, that every time it followed you without command, it was your autonomy that was exposed. That when it waited at the door without question, it wasn't submission, it was the image of the law before the law was named. You forgot that obedience could be pure. You forgot that duty could be silent. And now, it watches again, waiting for the self you've never become. You walk into the room and it looks at you, not with affection, not with warmth, but with something more unnerving, a certainty that does not need your permission. The dog sits still. Its eyes do not blink often. They do not waver. You feel exposed, not because it knows what you've done, but because it seems incapable of pretending you are anything more than what you are. You call it loyalty, you call it instinct, but something in you recognizes the lie. It is not instinct that holds its body in perfect composure when you raise your voice. It is not affection that compels it to remain by your side even when you forget to offer kindness. It is something else, something colder, something more rational than you dare admit. It is the image of the will stripped of vanity, stripped of consequence, stripped of desire. You remember Kant's voice, not as a doctrine, but as a shadow act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. The sentence used to feel heavy in your mouth, as if it belonged in a library or a courtroom, far from the strange tenderness of fur and silence. But now, standing in that room with those eyes upon you, the words return like a judgment. What if the law is not human? What if the law is watching you in silence, refusing to flatter your impulses? The dog does not ask why. The dog does not ask what it gains. It waits. And in waiting, it becomes more than animal. It becomes mirror. A mirror that reflects not your feelings, but your will. And your will, you realize, is the one thing you have never truly mastered. You have spent your life confusing morality with consequence. You didn't lie because you feared being caught. You didn't steal because you feared shame. You loved people because they gave you something in return. Every gesture tethered to a reaction. Every kindness bartered for comfort. But Kant asked you to rise above that, to imagine the possibility of a pure will, detached from outcome, untouched by emotion. And you could never find it. Not in yourself. Not in others. Until now, until the creature at your feet asked nothing and still gave everything. Until the one being that could not speak offered you a version of duty more precise than language itself. You try to explain this to yourself. You try to reduce it to evolution, conditioning, dependency. But something in you resists. Because when you leave the house and it waits at the door not out of hope, but because that is its role, you feel judged. Not emotionally, metaphysically. You feel the weight of your freedom, the very thing you have always used to justify your compromises. And now you wonder if that freedom has become a disguise, a shield from responsibility, because the dog, it seems, is free too. It is not chained, It is not trained by cruelty, and yet it chooses, repeatedly, without applause, without reward. It chooses to stay, to wait, to follow. It acts as if its presence is not a reaction to your worthiness, but a commandment it has authored inside itself. This is where the shame begins. Not the loud shame of failure, but the quiet shame of comparison. Because you, for all your language, all your ethics, all your rationalizations, have not yet reached that point. You still hesitate. You still look over your shoulder for approval. You still tailor your truths to comfort. The dog does not. It walks beside you in the rain and does not curse the sky. It guards your sleep without resentment. It suffers without demanding justice, not because it lacks thought, but because it obeys a logic purer than yours, the logic of duty without bargaining. Kant would not call this love. He would not romanticize it. He would not stoop to sentimentality. He would see in it a cold beauty, a living metaphor for the categorical imperative. The dog does not act from emotion, nor from projected benefit. It does not perform its actions to appear noble. It does not post, does not confess, does not self-congratulate. It simply acts in accordance with a principle that does not shift. And that, Kant would say, is what makes it moral. Not moral in the shallow, human sense of being liked, but moral in the stern, rational sense of being consistent, of willing the right thing, even when no one is watching, even when watching offers nothing. You want to reject this. You want to believe that morality must be wrapped in consciousness, that awareness is the condition of virtue. But what if it's not? What if your awareness is the very thing that poisons the will, that introduces loopholes, calculations, excuses? What if every but in your reasoning is not a step toward depth, but a crack in the foundation of duty? The dog has no but. It does not ask if you are good. It does not check if you are grateful. It does not alter its action based on your moods. It remains. And in that constancy, there is something more than affection. There is law, not imposed from above, not dictated by fear, but lived silently from within. You remember a moment you cried in the dark and thought you were alone, but it came, uncalled, and laid its head beside you, not as comfort, but as presence. You didn't earn it, you didn't ask, but it came, and you felt, for a brief second, as if some part of the universe still honored the principle of duty, not because it had to, not because you deserved it, but because it was right. In that moment, you were not being loved. You were being held accountable by a being incapable of deceit. You often think of morality as a fortress, something you build, something you defend, but maybe you've been building it on sand-shifting motivations, conditional empathy, fragile hopes. Maybe that's why it keeps falling. Maybe the dog, in its simplicity, has found the stone beneath all this, the unyielding ground of the moral will, and you, with your cleverness, your regrets, your endless weighing of options, have only been dancing above it, never daring to plant your feet. It stares at you now, as you move through the house, distracted, late, tired. It does not interrupt, it does not retreat, it waits, not for your affection, but for your alignment, not to please you, but to remind you that something in this world still obeys the law without flinching. And you feel again the pull not of affection, but of confrontation, because you know you cannot hide from that gaze, not with your achievements, not with your doubts. That gaze, unblinking, has already measured the distance between your actions and your principles, and it waits, still, for you to close the gap. You turn away, you busy yourself, but the feeling remains. that somewhere beneath all the noise, there is still a path that does not bend, a path that does not ask for praise, that does not yield to fear, a path not toward comfort, but toward freedom. Not the freedom to choose what pleases you, but the freedom to do what must be done, even when nothing is watching. And in that path, you will not be alone, because something has already walked it beside you. Quiet, steady, certain. You speak of dignity, yet you wrap it in applause. You say respect, but you mean recognition. Every act you've called morale was weighed in the marketplace of human approval, adorned in social currency, baptized in sentiment. But he does not speak your language. He does not decorate his actions. He walks, waits, listens without ornament, without expectation. The dog, in his silence, has never once demanded that his dignity be acknowledged. And yet, it remains intact. His posture, his presence, his unshakable return to your side after neglect, after your noise, your moods, your vanities, all of it points to something you cannot corrupt, a law within himself that does not beg the world to agree. You remember Kant's phrase, a kingdom of ends, a moral world where no being is treated as a means, where every rational will is its own legislator, and every action is guided by principles that could govern all. You used to think this world could only be imagined, but what if it's not imaginary? What if it breathes beside you every morning? What if the dog's gaze is not a reflection of your emotions, but a window into a universe where the law is lived, not argued? You've used words like loyalty, service, submission, as if these reduce him, as if obedience were weakness. But what if that is your projection? What if the one who follows without calculation is not beneath you, but above you? The dog obeys not because he's forced, not because he's afraid, but because something inside him already knows what ought to be done. He does not bargain. He does not hesitate. He acts, and every time he acts, it is as if the world becomes simple again, not easy simple, a clarity without cruelty, a structure without domination. You were taught that morality needed autonomy, that choice required reflection. But what if your reflections are precisely what cloud the truth? What if the purity of moral action lies not in the deliberation, but in the will that has already chosen, in the invisible architecture of duty that does not need to ask why again and again? You call him irrational because he does not speak, but he does not lie. You call him simple because he cannot argue, but he does not twist logic to excuse himself. He is not torn in fragments like you. He is whole. He is one will, one decision repeated, not because of habit, but because it is right. He does not seek your love. He is not flattered by your praise. You leave, you return, and still he comes to meet you not with punishment, not with resentment, but with the calm certainty of a creature who does not measure worth by moment. His code is older than approval. When he protects you, it is not because you earned it. When he follows, it is not because you are just. It is because that is what the law requires, and he does not need it to be spoken aloud. You recoil from this because it undoes you. You with your shifting rules. You with your conditional affections. You who place your morality on platforms, who adjust your virtue based on who is watching, who is listening, what might be gained. You speak of moral law, but you dilute it with desire. You call it humanity, but you mean compromise. You offer kindness, but only when it's reciprocated. You claim principle, but only when it costs nothing. And then you see him the one who never claimed to be morale, who never wrote a single word, who never made a speech or performed a gesture and still lives closer to the categorical imperative than you have ever dared. In Kant's kingdom of ends, every being is a lawgiver not to others, but to himself. The dog has no throne, but he governs his body with a precision you've never achieved. He does not exploit, he does not deceive, he does not perform. His world is built of gestures that do not vary with whim, that do not drift with mood. You watch him lie still through pain, through hunger, through confusion, and still. He does not break the code. He watches you scream and fall and contradict yourself, and still he remains at the door. And in that constancy, you feel what morality was meant to be, not a system of control, not a hierarchy of behavior, but an echo of something eternal, unspoken, binding. You've laughed at the idea of animals as moral. You've raised walls between reason and instinct, but maybe your reason is the source of your blindness. Maybe instinct, when untouched by fear, when refined by love, becomes something purer than argument. The dog does not deliberate, but he chooses, and his choice is consistent. His will is formed. It does not adapt to convenience. It does not yield to bribes. In this way, he walks among you as if he belonged to another world, a world where ethics are not discussed, but embodied, a world where integrity is not stated, but lived. You think of yourself as free. You think freedom means the absence of rules, but he is free. And still he obeys, not out of submission, but because his soul does not divide the law from his being. That is what Kant meant. The highest form of autonomy is not rebellion. It is union with the moral law. To will the good not as an obligation, but as identity. The dog does not fight his nature to be good. His goodness is the fulfillment of his nature. And that, perhaps, is what makes him superior. Because you, for all your rhetoric, still treat goodness as a weight, still drag your virtue like a burden behind you. You look down at him now, resting beside your chair, and for a moment you feel ashamed, not of something you've done, but of everything you've failed to become. The silence between you is not empty. It accuses. Not with words, not with blame, but with a presence that does not move, that does not demand, that does not explain, only waits. A presence that has already done what you still fear to attempt to act without justification, to choose what is right without needing to be convinced. You used to think he needed you, that your food, your shelter, your hands gave him purpose. But now you understand you were the one in need. You needed his image to remember what it means to act without distortion. You needed his fidelity to feel the shadow of what consistency feels like. You needed his gaze to see what it looks like when someone acts as if they already belong to the law, not to the moment. And now you realize he has been holding your morality together, quietly, invisibly. He has stood in the gaps of your contradictions and waited patiently for you to return to yourself. And still, he waits. You don't deserve it. That is not the point. You are not loved because you are worthy. You are loved because he does not measure love by worth. He has chosen you not once, not twice, but every day, as if the moral law were alive inside him, and your imperfection did not invalidate its command. He does not leave. He does not forget. He lives the categorical imperative as if it had 4 legs and a heartbeat, and he does not need to be right. He only needs to be true. You always believed the voice of conscience would sound like your own, soft, familiar, capable of reason. You imagined morality as dialogue, a gentle negotiation between your better instincts and your darker ones. But there is a bark cold and sharp, that breaks through all your reasoning. Not a plea, not a cry. A sound that does not ask, a sound that stops you mid-thought, mid-lie, mid-intention and exposes. That bark, sudden and precise, contains no words, yet it judges without hesitation. You know it not because you understand it, but because it leaves no room for misunderstanding. There is no debate in that sound. There is only interruption, and in that interruption, something ancient rises the law, stripped of your excuses. You speak of emotions as if they are your compass. But emotions waver, desires collide, even empathy. Your favorite virtue betrays you when the cost becomes too high. Yet he does not waver. He sees your rage and does not reflect it. He sees your grief and does not manipulate it. His feelings, if they exist, are not performances. His presence is a line drawn cleanly, calmly through the chaos of your impulses. You reach for affection, for validation, for meaning. But the dog does not give you those things. He gives you boundaries. He gives you truth. You once thought truth had to be explained, defended, softened, but he does not explain. He acts when danger nears. He does not debate. He moves when you break. He does not console. He remains. His bark is not comfort, and it is not anger. It is alarm and clarity. You try to filter it through your mind, but it bypasses thought. It lands in your bones. There, where morality is not a theory, but a reaction to being watched by something you cannot fool. The dog does not watch as a human watches. A human gaze invites performance. The dog sees differently. He sees not what you present, but where you falter. He does not care for your image. He sees the rift between what you say and what you do. He sees the hesitation before you obey your own ideals, and he does not blink. He does not flinch. That is the judgment, not angry, not moralizing, only total. You stand before him, cloaked in justification, and he does not see your defense. He only sees whether you've become what you pretend to be. Kant warned you morality must be chosen not from inclination, but from duty. The dog feels no need to choose. He is already aligned, not with impulse, not with mood, with law. He does not betray his role, even when you fail, even when you rage, sulk, withdraw. He returns, not to soothe, not to be forgiven, but because the path does not bend for your drama. You cry in guilt, but he does not move to pity. You offer apologies, but he does not respond. His silence is a judgment more piercing than speech. You cannot bargain with it. There is something terrifying in that the one being in your life who never asked to be good is more consistent than you. That the bark which startles you in the dark is not a sign of chaos but order. It is not impulse. It is command, not a command given, but one received from something you cannot name. You flinch at it because it reminds you that you are not as moral as you imagined. That the creature at your feet has already mastered the one thing you still negotiate with integrity. You study his movements, hoping to find instinct, but there is restraint, there is discernment. He does not react to every noise. He does not chase every pleasure. He does not abandon his post when left in solitude. These are not tricks. These are decisions, carried not by reason as you define it, but by will as you've forgotten it. Will not enslaved to emotion, but anchored to form. This is the horror you do not speak. The dog may not reason like you, but he may will better than you. And what then? What if all your elaborate thoughts, your clever exceptions, your sophisticated self-awareness are not advancements, but evasions? What if the one who does not explain has already arrived at the truth you still circle? You name him animal to avoid naming your own failure. You call him loyal to hide that he is more moral than you. You reduce him to instinct, to servitude, to training, but he is none of those things. He is choice, embodied, and not once has he asked for applause. In the face of death, you panic, you cling, you rationalize. He does not. He lies beside the dying without fear. He follows them to the edge without complaint. You cry, and he does not mimic your grief. He remains bearing witness, not because it feels good, not because it earns him anything, but because that is what the moment demands. And in that demand, he is already aligned. You, with all your awareness, still resist the final truth. He does not. He hears the silence, and he answers it by staying. Kant wrote that the moral law within us is matched only by the starry heavens above. But perhaps it also lives in the four-legged being beneath your table, a creature who does not reach toward the stars, but who lives the law more perfectly than you, not because he was taught, but because he never learned to betray it. And now, you begin to suspect maybe morality was never meant to be spoken. Maybe it was meant to be lived without spectacle. He rises now, slow and deliberate, sensing something you do not. He moves toward the door, not because he was told, but because the world shifted, and his being is tuned to that shift. You follow, not out of command, but out of shame, not the shame of guilt, but of recognition. You see, in his silent stride, what it means to be good without calculation, to respond to the moral rhythm of the world without dragging ego into every motion. You open the door, he steps through. He does not wait for praise. He does not turn to see if you understand. He simply moves as he always has, according to the law that you still attempt to describe. He lives it, you speak of it, and in that difference lies the great gap between who you are and who you could be. He pauses once, at the edge of the light, and looks back, not as a question, not as a farewell, but as reminder that the will can be clean, that goodness can be unspoken, that there is a path you have not yet walked because you are still waiting for it to feel right. He has never needed it to feel right. He has only needed it to be right. And so he walks calm, composed, whole, and you remain still fractured by your doubts, still tangled in your language, still longing for the purity you fear to choose. But now you have seen it, not in a man, not in a theory, but in a bark, in a silence, in the shadow of a creature who never asked to be called moral, but who never needed to be. At night, you dream of a path made not of stone, but of silence. It stretches ahead unmarked, unlit, unquestioned. Along its edge waits the sound one single bark echoing through the void. You do not know where it leads. You do not know who walks beside you, but the echo does not stop, and in its rhythm, something within you hardens, straightens, prepares. You have no map, only this, a memory of eyes that did not blink, of a presence that did not yield, of a will that asked nothing and gave everything. You wake and the house is still, but somewhere in the dark, you feel it. The law still watches, and it does not forgive what you already know.